On today's Locked On Thunder podcast, does the trade deadline have more, less, or the same amount of pressure on the Oklahoma City Thunder after the moves we've already seen? How did the Thunder match up with these new look teams, and who are some targets that you should monitor for the Thunder this week?
You are Locked On Thunder, your daily Oklahoma City Thunder podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Let's get it going on the Locked On Thunder podcast, on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I am your host, media member, and beat writer for Thunder on SI, Rylan Stiles. Follow me on Twitter at Rylan_Stiles. Follow the show on Twitter at LOThunderPod. Email the show, LOThunderPod@gmail.com. On today's show, brought to you by our good friends over at GameTime. Go check out the GameTime app today. When you download that app and create your account, make sure you use Locked On NBA for $20 off your first purchase. We're joined by Michael Martin at Michael on Sports on Twitter. Let's Talk Thunder on YouTube to discuss the heart-stopping Luka Doncic trade. De'Aaron Fox is now a Spur and a lot more. But Michael, when you first saw that Shams notification that Luka Doncic is a member of the Los Angeles Lakers, what was your initial reaction?
Shams got hacked. That was my initial reaction. And then sort of the 5 stages, I don't want to call it grief, but just 5 stages of shock maybe, of going through it. And then the tweet where Shams came through and said, no, this is real, which that's what I would also tweet if I hacked somebody's account. I would say this is real. But then you see Tim McMahon and ESPN tweets the graphics and things like that. Just total and complete shock. How were you feeling?
Yeah, I mean, it was stunning. I thought for sure that he was hacked, and then the moment that it became and that he was not hacked to me was whenever Tim McMahon retweeted the tweet, just because it'd be too unbelievable to see both of them get hacked on the same night at the same time. So I felt like it was real. Now that Tim is retweeting it, and then Stein jumps in, and of course Stein's one of the most plugged in ever in Dallas. So that kind of put the nail in the coffin. But this is a Mavericks team who everybody was cautious of. Everybody felt might have had the Thunder's number or a Thunder problem. And they were the team who I thought would give the Thunder the biggest challenge in the Western Conference as they were constructed 48 hours ago. But now with this trade, they trade Luca to LA. They get Anthony Davis. Are they better for their specific matchup against the Thunder? Are they worse? Are they about the same? Has your opinion of that potential series changed at all since this trade?
I would say it's worse for the Mavs. I mean, they have one ball handler now in Kyrie, and this Thunder team, we've seen them sort of like sick the guard dogs on opposing teams who don't have a ton of ball handlers. Like I'm thinking of Minnesota, for example. They really only have Mike Conley. Anthony Edwards isn't that guy yet. But I think that they would just put Lou Dort, Alex Caruso, Case, and J-Dub just all over Kyrie and just really give them a lot of problems. And if your secondary creators are guys like Klay Thompson, PJ Washington, and others like that, I think that that's going to be really, really problematic for Dallas. I think that it makes them better defensively, obviously. If you get one of the better defenders of all time in Anthony Davis and you put him in the lineup and replace Luka Doncic, that's going to be a big upgrade. But offensively, they just don't have the same firepower. I mean, Luka by himself is sort of just a top 5 offense. He's one of the more unique offensive engines we've ever seen. So I think right now I would say that things are looking brighter for the Thunder against the Mavs.
Yeah, because you look at how Luka carved up the Thunder, and while I think Shea was the best player in that series last year, I think that Kyrie had a quiet offensive series because of J-Dub, and credit to him. I think that Kyrie had a very loud defensive series. It was really impressive to see what he did defensively. But whenever they found PJ, and like that was the storyline of the whole series, was how much that Washington was killing them, it was really because of Luka's magician-like abilities to whip the ball across the floor, read defenses, and pick them apart. And not just read like where the ball should go, but be able to just throw a pass and dart one over to the corner, have the right accuracy, the right velocity, and all that goes into setting guys up that Luka does and has consistently done for 5 years. Without that, and now with just Kyrie Irving setting the table for Dallas, it does make them worse offensively. And then the question becomes defensively, what's the upgrade there? And I think that there's 2 different ways to view this from a Thunder perspective. The Mavericks defense could still give the Thunder trouble because you're able to have AD play the 4. Like, I imagine that he's going to want to do that. He's wanted to do that his whole career, is play the 4 and not the 5. And so you can pair him with Gafford. You can pair him with Lively once Lively's healthy. And that is a really crammed paint, and that's going to be tough on SGA. But it was also a really crammed paint last year, and SGA still dominated. But I think that Dallas, like, their goal is to turn this series into a rock fight, is to turn this series into just this muddy, murky mess offensively. And in that scenario, the Thunder have the defense equipped to do the same thing and make the Mavericks offense look a lot worse, because if you want to enjoy the benefits of a double big lineup with Anthony Davis, you've got to look at the negatives of what it does offensively, because neither one of Gafford and Lively can shoot enough to where a defense respects them. And so if they go stand at the three-point line, they're just ignored anyway. So that really hurts the pick and roll for Kyrie and AD. If they camp in the dunker spot, it really, of course, packs the paint for the pick and roll with Kyrie and AD. So there's no clear-cut offensive advantage anymore that the Mavericks can really benefit from in terms of just generating open looks. And we saw Shea hit the tough shots, and I think that the Mavericks are going to just concede everything but Shea, like pack the paint on Shea, make life tough on Shea, and then bet against Wiggins and Joe and Wallace and Dort and Caruso hitting big open threes. And it worked in their favor in that department a year ago. I don't know if it will or won't work in their favor right now, but if both teams have to play that way, if both teams have to grind it out in the paint and kick out to their role players, clearly PJ Washington gives them a massive vote of confidence. But en route to getting a PJ Washington outlier game, can Kyrie and AD outduel Shea and J-Dub and Chet on making tough shots and making tough makes in the mid-range and getting to the free throw line and getting to the rim? I would lean no right now. So I do think that while it doesn't solve the problem, it doesn't make the Mavericks a pushover game or a pushover series. I was already leaning Thunder, and I lean the Thunder even further now that Luka Doncic is out of the equation.
Yeah, just while you were talking, I was thinking about it. Of the Thunder, their biggest advantage in the playoffs last year going against the Mavs was the Chet units with him on the floor. And really thinking about it, I think that could be sort of a strong suit for the Mavs in terms of, like, you want to go small. They're not small, but Anthony Davis at the 5 versus Chet, I think, could give the Thunder a lot of problems. Like you mentioned, packing the paint defensively. The easiest way for the Thunder to sort of counter that is to play Chet or play small. So Anthony Davis, Lively, Gafford have to play out on the perimeter a little bit more. And I think that Anthony Davis could be a real matchup problem in that. I think the Thunder would just double him like crazy because he's not Jokic. He's not going to be a guy who just kills you out of double teams. And the shooting for the Mavericks is hot and cold, as we've seen with guys like PJ Washington, and we've seen with even Klay Thompson has been hot and cold this year. So I wouldn't be super worried about it, but I think it is a real factor just in terms of, like, thinking about these teams, the ability that the Mavs will have to sort of like match the Thunder going pseudo small.
Yeah, they certainly do have a better option to defend Chet on an island than they did previously. And that's one of the most interesting parts about this from a Thunder perspective is I thought that the Thunder already matched up well with the Mavericks, and they would have already won the series if I had to guess with Luka on the team. With Luka off the team, I still lean Thunder clearly. I lean them a little bit more now. But it does present this option where if these two teams matched up in the first round, you can truly just throw out the record books. You can throw out everything because nothing matters anymore from those previous games. Nothing matters from the playoffs. Nothing matters from this regular season. And there's already going to be an element of that because neither team was healthy throughout this regular season. And Dallas did win the series, 3-1. But the Thunder did win the one game of that season series that they had a big man for, which is no small feat. And ideally, they'll have two big men for the first time ever in the Spurs history whenever they do match up for the playoffs again. So the Thunder have completely changed. The Mavericks have completely changed. And like Mark has talked before about how the scout for Dallas is different because you've seen them so much. You've seen them over and over and over again, and both teams know each other. Now both teams know nothing about one another. The Thunder are completely different. The Mavericks are completely different. It's all learning on the fly. It's all about making adjustments. It's all about countering and playing this game of chess. And I think that's going to be super interesting to watch unfold if we get that series. I think that the rivalry is still there because we've seen the intensity remain in all four of these season series games, even though only one of the four had anything close to a healthy roster. Like at least one of them had Luca and Hartenstein and these guys. But other than that, it's been just shells of themselves in the rest of these games. And yet every game features multiple dust-ups and every game features a ton of animosity. So if the Mavericks fans can kind of dig themselves out of what they're feeling right now and get back on the bandwagon by the time the postseason comes around, it would still deliver the NBA. I think fantastic ratings. I think fantastic drama, fantastic storylines, even with this trade. But it is really unique to see this happen. And I do wonder if there's an element of gambling in the sense of Nico Harrison made the big moves last deadline, and that team came together on the fly. From the deadline to the end of the regular season, they look like the best team in the NBA statistically. And then in the postseason, they went to the NBA Finals. And you get that repeat success story this deadline where you put this team together on the fly. I don't think that they're done making moves. At least they shouldn't be done making moves yet. Can you get this team to come together after the trade deadline's over on Thursday and gel that quickly again? I think that last year was a unique recipe in that fact. Let's see how long it takes them to find their groove together as this new roster.
Yeah, I think it's going to be a really tough time. I mean, they have even more injuries this season than they did last year. And I was really thinking about how many guys are even left over from last year's series. It's like Kyrie, PJ Washington, Jaden Hardy, Gafford, Lively. Like, those are the main players. Like, the turnover has been crazy. I think that there is still going to be some juice and some rivalry energy between these two teams just because of the face, the name of the jersey. Like, there's still some stuff between the Thunder and the Warriors. None of those guys on the Thunder were there back then in 2016. But I think it's going to be a big ask for the Mavs to sort of gel like they did. Like, that was sort of unprecedented last year. And if you're trying to catch lightning in a bottle twice in back-to-back years, I would just bet against that. I think the Mavericks are a very solid team, and I think it would be a really interesting series against the Thunder. But yeah, somebody as unpredictable as Kyrie coming off this, Anthony Davis, his injury history, how sort of hot and cold Clay's been. I don't know. This team, you could tell me that they avoid the Thunder and they're going to be in the conference finals, second round, or you could tell me they lose in the play-in, and I'd have no idea.
So before this trade went down, you've heard me talk about this series between Dallas and Oklahoma City, and every time I talk about how I can't see a potential series ending before the sixth game, and I think it'll go 7 in all actuality, as the rosters were constructed on Friday night. Now that this trade's happened, Joel Lorenzi, who we had on the podcast on Sunday, he said that the Thunder could win in 5. Like, so where are you at on, like, if these two teams hypothetically played 1-8, and you got the playoff matchup and they were both healthy, where would you make the official prediction for that series to go?
5 or 6 is probably where I would set it. I'd set the over-under at 5.5. Like, I can see where Joel's making that point where the Thunder team, like, I just laid out the case of just sort of trapping Kyrie, making other guys beat him. I don't think that there's a lot of creation on this Mavs roster, but at the same time, like, just weird things happens when these two teams play, and we've seen it this year with Luca not playing in 3 of them. That doesn't mean it's everything, but there's still something to it. PJ Washington really gets up for this matchup. Kyrie, you get him in a Game 7 situation, he can go toe-to-toe with just about anybody. And then Anthony Davis, that matchup problem with Chet guarding him sort of in the mid-post and low-post, I think could really be there. But I think overall, in the grand scheme of things, this Thunder team has really improved, and their depth and high-level talent would be too much for them.
Yeah, and I think that the series would go 5 games at best. At worst, it'd go Thunder in 7. And then most of the time, whatever those two extremes are, it's usually in the middle. And so I think that this series, if I had to predict it today, would be a 6-game series, just like last year, where there's pockets of stats, there's pockets of the film, of the eye test, where each side can claim that the series either was closer than people think or was not closer than people think. But in the end, the reality was that was a hard-fought 6-game series. That was the most entertaining series of the playoffs last year. That had the star power, it had the drama, it had the competitiveness. And that's what it's going to be this time, I think, with the Thunder on the winning side of things in this hypothetical rematch in the playoffs. But the Mavericks still have work to do to make that possible. The Lakers, though, got Luka Doncic. Like, how does that change Luka, LeBron, the Lakers, and their status coming up? But first, I want to say right now, good friends over at GameTime, go check out the GameTime app today, because if you're looking for tickets for your next big event, whether it's concerts, comedy shows, or sporting games, find them right now for the right price without the headache. But with GameTime Picks, it's never been easier. So let me tell you how it works. With GameTime Picks, the app does all the hard work for you. It curates the best deals, so you don't have to waste time searching through endless ticket listings. It's right there. I've been using GameTime Picks for a while. It's incredible. I love to get in on the super deals. It's a prime seat that you will not be able to believe the value of said seat. And I love the seat view feature as a game changer, because before you even hit purchase, you can see exactly where your seat is and how the sightlines look in that venue. It's very reassuring of what you're looking for, and making sure if you're going to a concert, for example, I don't want to be behind the stage. So I don't care about the section row number. I care about where am I at in relatives to the stage, so you can go get that view at GameTime. And the best part is you're covered with GameTime's lowest price guaranteed. If you somehow find a better deal at GameTime, they'll refund you 110% of the difference. Plus, your tickets are guaranteed and delivered on time with easy cancellation options if something comes up. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with GameTime. Go download the GameTime app today, create your account, use code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Terms and conditions apply. Again, create your account, redeem code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Go download the GameTime app today. Last minute tickets, lowest prices guaranteed. We're back on the Locked On Thunder podcast, on the Locked On Podcast Network, your teams every day. Joining us today is Michael Martin. Let's Talk Thunder on YouTube, at Michael on Sports on social media. Michael, this Luka Doncic trade sends one of the best players in the world to the purple and gold to pair up with one of the best players of all time in LeBron James, two all-time greats joining forces, but it also leaves massive holes in this Lakers roster, and that's why I feel like neither team can be done. Neither team can rest after this massive blockbuster. They've got to try to continue to add through Thursday's deadline. As things sit right now for the Lakers, are you taking them more seriously, less seriously, or do you really not even know how to take them when it comes to contending out west with Luka and LeBron?
I'd say I'm in between less seriously and not knowing. Luka's injury status, I think, is a real thing with this. But like you said, I'm in the same boat as you, as to say their job's not done, the work's not done. They still have some moves to be made. This roster is incomplete, but if it stands as is right now, they have some huge defensive holes. They're they're the only team with two offensive engines of like supercomputer minds in Luka and LeBron. But defensively, like, you just go down the line, who guards Shea between Austin Reeves, LeBron, Luka? Like, none of those guys. So I think they're going to have some real big problems against a lot of the high-level players in the West. But at the same time, like, you talk about two big-game players who have had literally everything thrown at them, who could just walk the ball down, control the pace of a series. I think they could be dangerous. But I'd say that I'm on the lower side slightly. How are you feeling?
Yeah, I think that with the Lakers, it'll obviously, we'll see what they do, because they have to go get a center. There's just no ifs, ands, or buts, right? It's kind of like the old Moneyball scene where they were talking to Billy Beane about first base, and they were like, if a ball's at the first base right now, there's nobody there to stop it from rolling. If you get to the rim right now, there's nobody there from stopping you from dunking against the LA Lakers. And so they have to go fix that need. And I don't know how they're going to do it. And that's where I think that I come in lower, is because you look at the options out there. So who plays center that the Lakers could realistically trade for, and it just nets them even more matchup problems against the Oklahoma City Thunder in particular. Like, the Thunder are going to be able to outmatch up the Lakers, outcoach the Lakers. No offense to JJ Redick, but he just has the tools. He doesn't have the ingredients to make the meal that the Thunder do. And Luka, LeBron, it'll be great theater. It'll be great television. It will win them a couple games, bare minimum, just on their pure offensive alone, because you can stagger those two guys and come for 48 minutes of just offensive firepower. And some nights, as we've seen Luka drag even worse rosters than this to the Western Conference Finals, on some nights it'll just be too much. You can play textbook defense. This is a historically great defense. He's still gonna make shots. LeBron James is the same way. So like they would win a couple games on the Thunder, I think, but it would be one of those series where they win a couple games. Nobody really thinks that the Thunder are going to lose the series, and the Thunder do not lose the series, and they just get the win. But it was fun. It had highlights. It had moments, and that's just kind of it. It's a feel-good story. I think that this trade does way more for the Lakers long-term than it does for right now, this season, this April. I think long-term it goes from a team that was going to be left directionless with no assets and no LeBron once LeBron James calls it quits, to a team that now is the face of a franchise and one of the best players in the world for the next decade, at least. And so I think that that's a huge win. You can take solace in that. You can take solace in the fact that before this trade, I didn't think the Lakers would be that fun to watch in the playoffs besides just the nostalgia of LeBron. I think that they're going to give teams fights every single night just based upon their ability to outscore you. But when it comes to winning 4 out of 7 against the Thunder specifically, I don't view them as a contender to the Thunder's throne out west.
Yeah, I feel like this series between the Thunder and the Lakers would go similarly to the second time the Thunder were in the playoffs, where they lost in 6 to the Lakers the year before. The Lakers go on to win a championship, and then the next year the Thunder just blew them out in 5 games. It was just never really in question. And the more we talk about it, this Lakers team with Luca and LeBron, it's a little bit different because they're better passers and facilitators, not as great scorers, but I think that they could sort of have a dynamic like we saw with Booker and Durant a few years ago, just as like.
And whenever you see the offensive firepower of these two guys, clearly it's gonna be something that you want to enjoy if you're LA, and then you have the ability to play off of one another. But it is a little bit of a your turn, my turn stuff.
Yeah, to that point. I mean, I think that just offensively they can go toe to toe with anybody, but I think to your point, the theater of it's going to be really, really fun, but there's no one they can trade for that's going to match up with the Thunder. I mean, like the available centers, it's like Walker Kessler, Robert Williams, Jonas Valanciunas, guys like that just aren't needle movers at all. Like there's a reason why there's not much traction on them on the market right now in terms of for those teams. I think they could be decent backup bigs, but for those to be your starting centers, I think you're going to be in a really big bind. So the Lakers, congrats to them. Long term, I'm right there with you. They have a superstar franchise face. They had the biggest high since the Louisiana Purchase went on with that trade. So I think it's all up in Lakerland. It's just going to be the long-term thing. I think that Laker fans, it's going to be fun for the next few years, just watching these guys. But I think the real title window of them competing with the Lakers and Luca is going to be in a few years from now.
And this is the Western Conference that we've been promised, and it's delivered because the Kings just traded De'Aaron Fox to the Spurs, but they get back in return Zach LaVine, so they're able to run back LaVine and DeRozan on this roster, similarly to how Chicago tried to run it. But you look at the standings right now, Michael. The Warriors are tied in every column with the Kings for the 10th seed. The Spurs, who just got Fox, are only a couple games back of the 10th seed. And right now you have the Kings only a game back of the Mavericks for 9th. So 9th through 12th can really do some jostling here at the bottom of the standings. And not to mention that the Suns are tied with all of them as well. So really 8 through 12 can do some jostling in the standings for this play-in picture. Who ends up being left out? Because it sounds like the Warriors want to make a move by Thursday. We'll see if they get on the action. But we've had for sure the Spurs, Kings, and Mavericks make moves. Who gets left out? Because somebody's got to leave disappointed.
Man, that's tough. I'd probably say the Kings. I think it's going to take them the toughest time to sort of mesh. Like the Warriors' injuries or not, they sort of just have that like institutional knowledge. And then the Spurs, like they get an instant upgrade. Like they can drop Fox in. I think that there will be some sort of like phase of like sort of integrating him in. But Wemby's going to be so easy to play with, and the Spurs are a smart organization, so I wouldn't worry about that. But the Kings in particular, like I would guess that Zach LaVine was also pretty blindsided by this trade. So I feel like none of those guys are going to be super, super happy, but they're going to get in there and they're going to go, let's just make the best of it. And I don't think it's necessarily going to work out for them.
So I would agree that the Kings are going to fall out here. But which one of the Warriors and Spurs are you going to move up and take their place?
That's a great question. I'm riding with the Spurs. Let's have some fun. Let's get some of the old guard out. Let's get some young blood in there. The Spurs, it's just going to come down to how much do they actually want it, because we know that they have a few lottery picks there. So do they really push the chips in and sort of just like stretch Wemby and his minutes and see how far he can go? But the Warriors in particular, they've dealt with a lot of injury issues, and I just don't like their depth outside of Steph. I mean, we talked about Kyrie being the only shot creator. It's like no one else can dribble outside of Steph on that team. So I have no faith in them, and I think that they're sort of rudderless right now. They're looking for a trade to sort of like revitalize and like save their season, and I don't think that's coming.
Yeah, I think that of these teams, the reason I would agree with you with the Spurs too is that if the Warriors can't pull off a trade, if they can't bolster this roster at all, I think it'll reach a point where it becomes an unraveling for this specific season where if they don't do anything to help this roster, they're going to just continue to be this 500 mediocre ball club. And as the season drags on and you get to, the dog days of Mickey Mouse March, these veterans, I don't think will care I don't think that we'll try as hard as a Spurs team who everybody's trying to cut their teeth. Everybody's trying to get to that moment. Everybody wants to push for this opportunity. I don't think that the Warriors will value the opportunity of the play-in as much as the Spurs will if the front office doesn't, don't motivate them with the dangling the carrot of like, hey, went and improve this roster for you, kind of reinvigorating them by improving this roster. Now, if they make a move this week, it put me in a way different light for Golden State because I think that all they need is just kind of that little push from the front office of, hey, we're still behind you. But I don't know that push is going to come by Thursday, whereas the Spurs team, they have to just be elated with what they've accomplished, getting Fox, keeping Castle, having Wemby, being a team that's on the precipice of like, we feel like we can really build something here. And it's kind of always easier to kind of start that journey than what the Warriors are trying to do later in their career. So I would agree on both fronts. But coming up, do these moves from the Spurs, from the Mavericks, from the Lakers put more pressure on Oklahoma City, or do they just get to sit back and enjoy the carnage at the trade deadline? We'll talk about that coming up. But first, I want to say right now, but our good friends over at PrizePicks, go check out PrizePicks today because basketball season is heating up, and there's no better way to get in on the action than with PrizePicks, the best way to play daily fantasy sports with over 10 million members and billions in awarded winnings. PrizePicks makes it easy and fun to turn your sports knowledge into real money. Here's how it works. You just pick more or less on at least 2 player projections, and if you're right, you could win 1,000 times your cash. This week, you can even make projections on SGA, more or less than 30.5 points against the Milwaukee Bucks. You can make your projections on Jalen Williams, more or less than 1.5 steals against the Milwaukee Bucks. And there you go. You're able to put together a nice play there by downloading the app and using code LOCKEDONNBA. You get $50 instantly after you place your first $5 lineup. That's it. Just place it. Just place your $5 lineup and you get $50 instantly when you play that lineup using the code LOCKEDONNBA after you download the PrizePicks app. PrizePicks, run your game. We're back on the Locked On Thunder podcast on the Locked On Podcast Network, your teams every day. Thank you so much for making us your first listen every single morning, every single day. We're here for you talking Thunder basketball. Michael, it is the trade deadline week. It's a lot of fun. Every year we get geared up for it. Some years we get let down. Some years it's a massive boost. This year's already a massive success because we saw the most unprecedented trade in NBA history, which will feed the families of the content machine for quite a while. But for the Thunder's perspective, you look up and down this West standings, and the number 2 seed Rockets, well, they don't really strike fear in you. Memphis, I think, is so interesting. I cannot wait for Saturday. I hope that both teams are healthy. So that way we can see how they match up. And Memphis is interesting. The Nuggets have the best player in the world, and that's going to create issues. We just went over the Lakers. The Clippers don't strike that fear in you. The Timberwolves are a shell of themselves from a year ago. The Suns don't have the depth, and we've talked about the Mavericks, and then we have the Kings and Warriors, who neither one of us are inspired by, and then a Spurs team who is spunky, but the Thunder should be able to handle. So you go down the West, and it feels like it's not only wide open, but it feels like the Thunder are the clear favorites in this conference without doing anything, just watching things unfold on the other side. But the Thunder still have plenty of assets. The Thunder have a team that they know is good enough to win a championship. The Thunder only have 9 losses on February 3rd. Does what's happened this weekend put more or less, or it doesn't even move the needle in either direction for the Thunder in terms of their expectations of what they should do at the trade deadline?
I think it changes the expectations slightly. Honestly, I think it just puts the people in each camp of no trade or trade further in that camp, I think. I think the people who say no trade are going to go, well, the Mavericks got worse, so why do you need to upgrade? That was the team you really needed to beat. Whereas the people, I guess, on my side of pro-trade would go, the West is never going to be easy, but you could make your path easier slightly if you make this deal for a guy like Cam Johnson or whoever to really bolster your case because, like you mentioned, some of these teams that are down right now, the West, as we know, has been the dominant conference for 2-3 decades, and I think they're going to bounce right back. So you have this window right now of opportunity for this season that I think is really important for the Thunder to capitalize on. But overall, I think it's just going to get people who are already on one side of the argument or the other one more entrenched in it. How are you feeling?
Yeah, I think that you summed it up perfectly. It doesn't move anything in the scheme of things. It just puts you further into the hole you've already dug. Like I'm somebody who's leaned more cautiously for this trade deadline because I think that this team's played at a level that they deserve another chance in the playoffs. Like Wiggins and Joe and Kaysen and Caruso and Dort, they deserve a chance to show, hey, we can hit the big shots that you need, which is why you're trading for Cam Johnson. And if they don't, then Sam Presti has shown you that in the summertime, bada bing, bada boom, he'll go try to course correct this roster. And yes, it would suck to have hindsight of saying, well, if they had Cam Johnson shooting those threes instead of those guys, maybe they would have won that series. But you're also still going to have 5, 6, 7 years ahead of you to try to make all this work. And then so that's where I've been. So and then on the grand scheme of things, I don't think that you sway one side or the other because of what's happened out west. Because I think that you can look at those things and it can either affirm, if you think that the Mavericks are a nightmare problem, we've already seen the comments of like, oh, the Mavericks have so many bigs and they've just got even bigger. And that's been the biggest flaw against the Thunder. Whereas we're saying that we don't think that the Mavericks got better in their quest to beat the Thunder and their quest to, move on past Oklahoma City. So I guess where I'm at is I still would lean conservative, although I will admit if you went and got Cam Johnson, it would no longer be a debate or discussion or a conversation or even a whisper of who should make it out of the West. It would be the Oklahoma City Thunder with a bullet, and even the most contrarian, even the most staunch, haters, for lack of a better term, of the Thunder of saying, oh, they're too young or, it's not their time yet or skeptics, they even would have to admit that the Thunder are the favorites out West and one of the favorites to win the NBA title, if not the outright favorite to win the NBA title. So that's where, to me, this conversation is why I don't envy Sam Presti, because like I don't think he can go wrong either way. Like I'm not gonna lambaste the guy Friday morning if he doesn't make a trade, and if he does make a trade, I'm totally gonna see why he did it and be really pumped for this organization that they did it. And so I just don't know. I don't know where he should go. But for me, if I was the GM, I would go get Cam Johnson, and I would take that risk. But I'm not going to fault them if they don't take that risk because of how good this team's been.
Yeah, I'd be slightly disappointed, but I couldn't be that upset because I understand where they're coming from of wanting to let things ride out and not want to shake up things too much. But I'm with you in terms of Cam Johnson being an elite shooter, and I just don't know how. I mean, the Thunder can outbid anyone, so they can really go get a lot of guys, but I don't know how often these guys, in particular, a guy like Cam Johnson, that skill set's going to be available where you don't have to overwhelm it with an offer where he's like really, really on the market. So trade or no trade, I think this team still has a really good chance to win a title. I just like the insurance factor of getting a guy like Cam Johnson. He fixes a lot of issues that this team has had. And I think regardless of what happens, there's going to be a lot of revisionist history from people in terms of like, if it works out where they get no trade, then a lot of people are, I was anti-trade the entire time. If they do trade somebody, then it's going to be people who are pro-trade. If they lose because they didn't make a trade, some people are going to say, why didn't you get Cam Johnson, who are obviously very staunchly in the camp of no trade. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens. The Thunder are going to have a good chance, but I'm personally, fingers crossed, hoping for a trade.
Yeah, and I think that what makes it, too, the reason why I err cautiously at the deadline is because, one, they've done all this without their second best player, and it's really tough to change the chemistry of this team whenever you're already going to have to integrate in someone of that magnitude. But to me, there's only one guy out there that I think, without a shadow of a doubt, changes the Thunder for the better. Like, without a shadow of a doubt, to me, I can see the vision for why you'd want Cam Johnson. Every other trade candidate on the market right now, I'm having to do squinting. I'm having to say, well, is he really that much better? Are we sure he can fit this system? And so when everything rests at one guy's feet, at one hand it can be good because, like you said, the Thunder have the assets to go get anyone. But on the other hand, it's like, well, if it's one guy or bust, it's tough to hold them to that standard. So I just don't see a ton out there. But if I was running the team, I would do the Sam Presti trade. I mean, the Cam Johnson trade. Also, if I was running the team, I would be playing Darius Bazley still to this day. So what do we know? We'll find out on Thursday, though. But I think the Thunder have done an excellent job of keeping everything under wraps. Like, no one has definitively reported they are or are not doing anything. Nobody has definitively reported that they do or do not have interest in anyone. And that makes for a very fun week because I just think that we all have our opinions and we all have where we think the team is leaning, but no one knows for sure. And that's the way I think the Thunder want it.
Yeah, I mean, we had a good feeling about the Isaiah Hartenstein signing. That went well. We had no idea about Josh Giddey and Alex Caruso. Could have never known that. We had a good feeling about Chet Holmgren, I guess, at the draft back in the day. J-Dub, who knows? Josh Giddey, we didn't know. We thought it was going to be James Bouknight, I think a lot of us. So the Thunder, you mentioned the misinformation game was sort of just like controlling the narrative. They've done an incredible job of like whatever's put out there of the Thunder really interested in making a trade. I think you and I and a lot of people would go, well, that means they're not. They're trying to put out the opposite. And then if we haven't heard anything from the Thunder, it's been really quiet. It'd be like, well, sounds like they're going to make a trade. So there's really no predicting this. I think that we have our instincts about certain things. Like I felt really strongly like back in October of last year about a Gordon Hayward trade. I ended up being right for once. But with Sam, like he sort of operates the beat of his own drum and he's going to do what he thinks is best for this franchise. And I trust him in that. Ultimately, I hope it's a trade, but like you mentioned, he's very unpredictable.
It is unpredictable, and I cannot wait to see how it really does unfold. But Michael, you have a video up already on Cam Johnson. You can go see Michael's trade package for Cam Johnson, which is the trade package I would make if it was available to me as the GM of the Thunder. So you can go see the breakdown of Cam as an individual player and also kind of the cost benefit of making a trade like that. But the content game never stops, Michael. You have another one coming out pretty soon.
Yeah, with Jalen Williams making his first all-star team, I'm just going to talk about sort of just how well-rounded he is, how many different skills he has as sort of the do-it-all star for the Oklahoma City Thunder, so you can look forward to that. But definitely check out the Cam Johnson video before the trade deadline. I think I laid out a pretty good case on why I would go get him, and I'd be interested in hearing what you all think.
So go check that out. I thought it was a great video. You can check out my thoughts on the trade deadline and my thoughts even more on this Luka trade over the weekend and from last week. So go check that out on Locked On Thunder anywhere you get your podcast from. Make sure you check out thunderonsi.com. And until tomorrow, whenever we're going to recap this Bucks game, which is a phenomenal game, be good and be good to one another.